Hello, fantasy baseball fans. I am Paul Williamson at SportsEthos.com. This is Fantasy MLB Today, Sports Ethos presentation brought to you by FanDuel. As always, an honor and a privilege to give you all this podcast, give you all some information, advice to help you win your leagues, give your team the boost. Before we get the conversation for today, where I have Owen Hurd joining me, we're talking hitting targets, and you can see me on YouTube now. So make sure you follow and subscribe to the channel on YouTube at Sports Ethos. Now, all of my podcasts will hopefully now be on video form on YouTube. So make sure you check us out there. Also, follow me on Twitter at PaulW_34 and on Twitter at PaulW34 with no underscore on Bluesky to get more of me. Ask me questions, hit me up. Let's get ready for 2026. Follow Sports Ethos Fantasy Baseball accounts at Ethos Fantasy BB on Twitter, at Ethos Fantasy MLB on Bluesky. Updates all of our in-season content. Get ready for the draft guide coming out. So make sure you hit us up for that. And of course, the free blurb feed, always rocking and rolling, getting you ready for 2026. And then please rate and subscribe to podcasts. Please rate and subscribe to podcasts. Really help push it out. I will love you forever. Owen, man, thank you so much for joining me, man. You can follow Owen at Owen_FBB, and he is with Scout the Statline, and you can follow Scout the Statline at Statline Scout. That's at Statline Scout. Owen, man, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, and look forward to this episode. Should be a fun one. A lot of hitter targets to talk about, so excited to get into it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So how did you get into Scout the Statline, and what's the big appeal of it?
Yeah, so the primary focus of Scout the Statline, or I'd say the big part of our model, is our peak projections model, which it essentially provides peak MLB projections with varying levels of regression for every minor league prospect with a pro sample size. So that's a big one. That's a big one for us. We also do some podcasts. I host one with Ross Jensen, as well as Doc Eisenhower and Matt Morris host theirs. We also have kind of a hobby tool which compares the first Bowman market prices of prospects in our peak projections model compared to basically kind of says whether they're a strong buy, hold, or sell based on what they're selling for versus what the model projects them to be. So those are two of the big features that people really enjoy.
Awesome, man. So make sure you go check out Scout the Statline. You go to scoutthestatline.com, or you can follow them on Twitter at Statline Scout to get all those lovely goodies to get you ready for 2026 through them as well. So a couple of big news dropping today before we get into our hitter targets. This first is Nolan Arenado being dealt to the Diamondbacks in exchange for Jack Martinez, a 8th round pick, I believe, in the 2025 draft, the 23-year-old college arm, not too much of a return, obviously, for someone like Arenado. Does this have the move the needle for you at all for fantasy?
Not really. Nolan Arenado is not somebody who's going to be on probably any of my teams in 2026 anyway. I do like the deal for the Diamondbacks, though, to essentially get Nolan Arenado at 2 years and $11 million, looking at some of the prices that have been paid for kind of, aging bats you might get a little bit out of. I kind of question it from the Cardinals' perspective to eat that much money and take a prospect back. But I think there's some interesting things with Jack Martinez. The delivery is freakish and scares me a lot. Stuff-wise, the fastball's got some good ride and good velo. There's a potential 4-pitch mix there. So interested to see kind of what the new regime will do with his development. No, the trade doesn't really move much for me. It doesn't really move the needle much for me. Nolan Arenado has hit well at Chase Field, but I don't know. It's just he was a guy that, I would, even if he did get traded, probably wouldn't be on a lot of my teams, given a lot of the declining quality contact and batted ball metrics. The ratios are still good, but I just don't. It's not a big bump for me for Nolan Arenado's fantasy appeal in 2026.
Yeah. You go look at the park factors. Arizona's second, right? So maybe a batting average bump here. But what's for me with the Diamondback side, now Jordan Lawler's still probably not going to be a major part of this team. And on the flip side for the Cardinals, JJ Weatherholt now has a better path to playing time. And Weatherholt is someone who I am particularly pretty interested in. Let's see here. His ADP headed in is 326. Imagine that's going to get a bump after this deal. What's your any thoughts on Weatherholt? How in are you on him? Or do you think that this is just the nothing doing for you?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting profile for fantasy between the hit, the power. He's going to be a good guy for ratios too, especially a and potentially carry eligibility at a premium position, that being second base. If he gets playing time there, a Brendan Donovan deal would certainly open that up a bit. From an ADP perspective, though, I'm always kind of wary with prospects yet to debut. We've kind of seen the Bubba Chandlers of the world that look like they can break camp with the team, and then you don't see them up until July or August. At the ADP, I don't mind taking a shot, but just something I'm always wary of with when I'm kind of buying prospects in redraft that have yet to debut, because especially with where the Cardinals are at, there's definitely those scenarios where they hold him past the Super 2 deadline, or you kind of see him as more of a May, June call up, and then we've seen prospects that mash AAA struggle with the transition. It is a big jump. I am interested in Weatherholt's profile long term, although it's still tempering expectations a bit for 2026.
Yeah, definitely more of a dynasty buy than a redraft buy for me because, definitely some mystery numbers, nice exit velocity numbers in AAA, a nice hard hit rate, and also got the ground ball rate down to 43%. So he's definitely progressing right along. But, if he has a poor spring, he's not going to make the team. And so definitely a lot of risk right now going on with Weatherholt. Alrighty, the second bit of news we got is coming in the form of a ballpark change in Kansas City. Kauffman Stadium is now going to have shorter fences, per Jeff Passan of ESPN. So some highlights of the article here. The goal of the change is to make the ballpark play neutral. They've brought in the power alleys about 10 feet, and they've lowered the fence about 1.5 inches. So they're not trying to make it a hitter's park. They're claiming this is going to be a neutral move. They were talking to some analytics dude there that especially with the wind issues in Kansas City, creating what they say is about a 5-foot decrease on ball distance as a result. So bringing in the fences. What kind of does this bump up the value for Royal hitters and decrease the value of Royal pitchers, or is it a hitter by hitter basis for you?
I would say I'd say it could help a lot of the guys, at least in their power numbers, at least a little bit. I wouldn't say it's like a plus 5 home run boost, but I do think you could see maybe someone like Maikel Garcia push kind of 20 home runs. I think that's possible. Definitely, very interested in Carter Jensen already. Definitely makes him a bit slightly more appealing to me. I like a lot of the hitters, and especially kind of given the ballpark change, maybe slightly more, although not kind of carried away more, given it is still a neutral park.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, they didn't bring in the corners. Those are still 330. This is really just a move for the power alleys. Like the right center, center field, and left center seem to kind of be symmetrical now. So not exactly symmetrical, but pretty close to it. So not big time. For me, for the pitchers, the big thing for me is looking at the barrel rates of Seth Lugo last year was a little high. Got to see that get under control. And then I'm not worried about Bubic because he already is a bit of a ground ball dude. Michael Walker is already a soft contact kind of guy. So, I don't think he's going to be impacted too much, even though he is a bit of a fly ball guy. And Cole Reagans is a stud. I'm not worried about him almost anywhere where he pitches. So, and like you said, with the hitters, this might help them incrementally with their power. And we're going to be talking about a couple of key Royals hitters later in the podcast. So we'll get to that when we get there. So let's move on to our hitter targets. We're going to break this up based on 15-team draft champion leagues. So we're going to go basically first 5 rounds, the next 5 rounds, top 75, then 76 to 150, and so on and so forth. Then give you some sleepers at the end. So for the hitters in the top 75, Owen, who are you targeted?
Yeah, so the biggest one for me is Jackson Merrill at 70.3. I think that's kind of way too low of a drop for him, given that he was playing through a slurry of injuries last year, including a concussion. Still interested in the profile. I think the upside is still kind of yet to be determined, but I do think there's kind of a very good floor of a guy who will hit for average, give you a solid OBP, and can give you 20 plus home runs and 15 plus steals, and with some good ratios as well. So very interested in Jackson Merrill at cost. He's probably someone I will be targeting everywhere. And I do think that we can see him bounce back to return, round 2 or round 3 value in 2026.
Right on, man. Absolutely, man. I love Jackson Merrill as well. My question to you is on this is the hamstring injury he had early in the season. Do you think that was the reason for the steals decline? What do you think about Merrill in the steals department?
Yeah, I think I think the speed coming up was a bit overstated. I do think the hamstring injury played a little bit into that. I don't think he's going to be kind of an elite base dealer, but I do think kind of that 15 to 20 range is very plausible. And I think it was encouraging to see some of the underlying data remain pretty similar despite the injuries too. The EVs didn't drop too much. Launch angles got better. The barrel rate actually improved. The hard hit rate was pretty much in line with his 2024. So I do think we're going to see a big jump back to fantasy stardom, maybe not superstardom for Jackson.
Yeah, no, I get you. You're right on the barrel rate, the hard hit rates. The overall contact never hit tool is still there for him as well. And the sprint speed was also there. And so it's not like he got slower. So definitely still has that stealed potential. The dude that I'm targeting is Roman Anthony. He's going to pick number 60 right now in these draft champion leagues. And there are a couple things that I love. First, obviously, he hits the crap out of the ball. 60% hard hit rate last year, 15% on the barrel rate, elite bat speed. When he makes contact, he's going to make contact and he's going to wreck that baseball. Now, of course, the question is going to be, can he actually make contact? And a couple of encouraging signs from me last year is that as the season got along, we saw him swing at pitches inside the zone more. The end zone swing rate did go up 4 percentage points from the first half to the second half. But he's a selective swinger. So him swinging at more pitches in the zone is always going to be a positive thing for him. And we also saw what that did in the second half. We had an incredible second half of last year. And I love the fact that you get a selective approach and more swings in the zone. Also led to an increase in the end zone contact rate. The end zone contact rate sitting at 81%. That end zone contact rate was sitting at 85, 86% throughout the minor leagues. And so he has the ability to make good swing decisions, swing at pitches in the zone, make contact inside of the zone, especially for someone with a sub 40% overall swing rate. Got to see him make that contact in the zone. And he did, or he started to do that last year with that end zone contact rate between 80 81. And then, man, anytime you're sitting there with a guy with that type of exit velocity, that type of barrel rate, that type of upside, that's a first round dude right there. You're getting at pick 60, especially with the way I like to draft. First couple of rounds, I like to go pretty safe. I'm targeting the Lindors and the Machados of the world. And then in these rounds 4 or 5, I'm starting to take a little more risk. And Roman Anthony, I think, definitely fits that profile. What are your thoughts on Anthony for 26?
Yeah, I think it's scary when you see kind of a in a good way, when you see a 21-year-old prospect come up, just like you said, put up the EVs he did, the barrel rate he did, the hard hit rate he did, and then you kind of pair that with a guy who chases at a below average clip. The zone contact's respectable, the swing strike rate and the ratios weren't anything glaring for a rookie his age. The one thing I would like to see is the launch angles improve. The 50.1% ground ball rate. I do think that's going to need to come down for him to actualize the raw power into game power. But I think Roman Anthony is just an absolute toolkit for fantasy, who I agree is that at that point in the draft I'm willing to kind of take a shot on the upside. And, I think that we could kind of see him as a 20-20 guy with good ratios, good average as soon as 2026. And he's only going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And the thing is that, like, his barrel rates and hard hit rates, in my opinion, give him a great floor. So even if that ground ball rate doesn't get to where you want it to be, the fact that he still has such elite barrel rates is going to give him at least a floor on his power. An incremental improvement in that area is going to shoot him through the roof. And so there's just so much potential there for Roman Anthony there, man. I love the guy. He's got so much potential, and sitting there at pick 60, man, it's just such incredible value in my opinion. Anything else you want to add on to Anthony before we move on to the next batch of names?
No, they're very excited to see Roman Anthony in 2026. And I do think he's someone who I like at the ADP, minimal concerns with, but I do think he's going to pay dividends or at least kind of live up to his ADP in 2026.
Right on, man. So let's move on to the next 5 rounds, pick 76 through 150. Who you got?
Yes, my biggest target in that range is Corey Seager. I understand the injuries. I understand he's kind of a question mark of whether you're getting, even 120 games from him. I think, the underlying data shows this, his performance still shows this, is that he is more elite than some of the guys going ahead of him over 150, 160 games with the games that he's giving you. The ratios are still really good. The 13.0 walk rate last year was actually a career best. Paired that with a sub 20% K rate. 271, 373, 487, 21 home runs, 50 RBIs in 102 games. I'm still very much in on Corey Seager. The EVs still remained elite, 92.9 average, 15.3 barrel rate, 53.6 hard hit rate. And I think, too, especially given the depth at shortstop, Corey Seager is someone that I am very willing to take just outside of pick 100 and kind of pair him with, maybe a kind of safer floor option later at the position, just given the depth of that position. So very, very much like Corey Seager, where he's going. And I think he's going to be, I think even if we're getting 110, 120 games out of him in 2026, he's going to be a big value there at ADP.
Yeah, yeah. And for my liking, as the Corey Seager, I think is a great option if you miss out on some of the Elite 5 category dudes early. I would love to take a more of a 5 category guy at shortstop earlier in the draft. But if I miss out on those names, if the price isn't right there, Seager here just outside of pick 100 is just fine by me. And you know what? Why not have 2 shortstops this early in the draft? Because shortstop is just that damn good. And Seager, man, you mentioned the barrel rates, the hard hit rates. The barrel rate's been 15% or better in, 3 straight campaigns. So it's not like it was a one-off. This dude is consistently provided elite quality of contact numbers throughout his career, especially recently. There's no decline in the plate discipline numbers. There's only good here. And his latest injury that made him miss most of last year was an appendectomy. And so it's not like there's some type of, long-term injury issue, at least from the end of the year. He's just recovering from an appendectomy. And so, that gives me some extra confidence in his health headed into 2026. And so I very much think that we hopefully will be in line for at least 550 to 600 plate appearances, and that will get him to that value, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think just to recap some of the names going higher than him right now, he's currently the shortstop 11. I would take him over CJ Abrams, who's the shortstop 8 right now at pick number 51. I would take him over Geraldo Perdomo at 79.5. I'd take him over Jeremy Pena, 5 picks earlier. I mean, I think you could even talk me into taking him over Mookie Betts, who's the shortstop 7 at 50.9, which you could even argue is a value. But really, I just think I think Corey Seager is if he stays on the field for 110, 120 games, is a safe bet to return to 30 home runs with a great slash line and at least give you above average to plus production in 3 to 4 categories. So I would not be surprised to see Corey Seager as a top 5 shortstop once again in 2026. And I think at cost, he's one of my favorite options at the position.
Yeah, I think that's the key there is at cost for me. Because while in a vacuum, Seager versus someone like Abrams, it's Abrams, but at cost, it's Seager because Abrams at what you said just outside pick 50. I don't like that one so much. That's why I really want to try and target, guys like Francisco Lindor, Gunnar Henderson real early, try and get one of those dudes because then you're trying to play the value game late in drafts. Where it's like, well, if I don't miss out on Seager, if someone picks someone in the 80 range, where am I sitting at there? And so I really want to try and lock up shortstop pretty early in general. And you know what? If I sit there at pick 100 and Corey Seager's still sitting there and I already have my shortstop, I got no qualms taking a second shortstop there because for me it's all about value at that pick, and he definitely provides that value without a shadow of a doubt. My pick in this range is going at pick 135, and that's Joe Adell of the Angels. I mean, he finally broke out, and he was one of my regrettable drops last year because he was really bad to begin the season last year. And I tried and I ended up having to let him go. But my God, did he figure it out and turn in a hell of a campaign. 37 home runs. Like the strikeout rate dropping just a little bit to 26%. Obviously the quality of contact is there. 17% barrel rate, 49% on the hard hit, 91 on the EV. And he underperformed all of his expected stats as well. So this more data backing up the fact that there's still probably a little bit of more room for him to grow a little bit here. And the thing is, for me, I love the incremental improvements we've seen in his plate discipline, in particular, the end zone contact rate going from 81% to 84%, the overall contact rate going from 72 to just below 74%. And I love incremental improvements. I love that because I can feel more confident in it because it's not like he jumped 10% out of nowhere. It was an incremental, slow increase that makes it toward where I feel more confident in taking him because it wasn't like some outliery number. Because that's always my problem sometimes when someone breaks out. It's just all of a sudden they've got like double the barrel rate. They got, all these crazy awesome metrics that have never been there before. With Joe Adell, we're seeing the incremental improvement in the plate discipline numbers. And then the steals, I think, still could potentially come back here. He was a league average runner next year. If FanGraphs depth charts are correct, and he's sitting just ahead of Jorge Soler and Logan O'Hoppe in the lineup, that he's not taking the bat out of anybody's hands. And I think the Angels might be a little more willing to risk him on the base paths with those type of guys in the box, as opposed to maybe him being in the box with someone like being on first with someone like Mike Trout on the bases. So I think there is a potential for the steals to come around, but I don't think you have to draft him at this price for the steals. He is someone that I think you can pencil him in for 25 to 30 homers as like a floor. He could get to 40, 45 homers with these type of barrel rates and exit velocities. And he also got the pull rate back up to 42%. And that's another big thing I love we saw from Adell, is that pull rate didn't drop down. It went back to where it was and where it needs to be. And so there's just a lot to like about Adell. And at pick 135 to get this kind of power at this price, absolutely. I would probably take Joe Adell close to pick 100.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to note, this is something I've dug pretty deeply into Joe Adell this season. I do like him at cost in comparison to someone like Kyle Stowers going 30 picks earlier. Couple things that stood out to me. The chase rate at 31.7% was kind of very much in line with his career norms. The O contact rate dropped a little bit. The swing strike rate was the same as 2024. So I do think there's definitely some things in the profile that give me a little bit of hesitancy about whether we'll see him live up to kind of some of the expected stats, especially the XBA. But I think the barrel rate jump is definitely for me a pretty big driver, in that I do think he's going to at least repeat the home run side. And I just don't. I'm unsure if the average or the OBP are ever going to be there. But like you said, at price, you don't really need him to. I think it's there's a lot of kind of one tool guys, and that being their power, going a lot closer to pick 100, and then Joe Adell at 137, which I like him at cost a lot more. Probably someone I'll still take a few shots on. It's just. It's kind of not a profile that I love, but I do think the power at that point in the draft is one that I'd be willing to take a shot on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And the thing is with me in the plate discipline is that he just has to make enough contact. He doesn't have to get up into the high 70s, man. If he can just keep that contact rate in the 71, 72, 73% range, he's going to be fine, because that barrel rate, that type of power was what we kind of thought he was when he was a prospect. And so it's not like it's a Geraldo Perdomo situation where it really wasn't there as a prospect and then it just kind of happened. That's what scares me. But with Adell, this was kind of what we thought he would become as a prospect, and we did see it. And there is a good discount here at 130 as well. So some of that risk is baked into the cost. And so for me, I love Adell at this price. I mean, it's a guy who has like first round power potential. You're getting well outside pick 100. And especially I love what you said about Kyle Stowers, taking him over Stowers. I mean, I like me some Stowers, I do, but I think I'm definitely more of an Adell fan than I am Stowers. That's for sure.
Yeah. So one thing to throw at you, since I brought it up, and I think it's some good food for thought, is who would you rather at cost, Geraldo Perdomo or Joe Adell?
Adell.
Okay.
For me,
that's sorry. Go ahead.
no, for me, Perdomo, needs a lot to happen for him to get to where he needs to get that type of cost. He hit 10 of his final 20 homers in that second half, and like his final 200 something plate appearances, with a pull rate jumped up to 46%. I just did a little dive on Perdomo myself, so these numbers are kind of fresh in my mind. So he had an extremely high pull rate in a small sample size at the end of last year that got him to 20 homers. He's generally been a low 40s, high 30% pull rate kind of dude. That barrel rate doubled from 3% to 6%. And I get the plate discipline, right? He's an incredible hit tool kind of dude, but he's got to get back to 6%. He's got to double that barrel rate again. And then he's got to get that pull rate going. The lift is there. I'll give you that. And the hit tool gives him a good batting average. And maybe I can give you the steals. But man, he also has to accumulate too, right? Like he got to 700 plate appearances last year in order for him to get that many runs in RBI. Can he get the 700 plate appearances again this year? That's something that not too many major leaguers do on a year-to-year basis, and so I question that. So there's just too much for Perdomo. Has to go right for him in order for him to live up to his draft cost.
That's fair. I'm glad we have a dissenting opinion on this, because I would rather Perdomo at cost, even given the potential power regression, because I do think he's a close to 300 guy, elite OBP, elite ratios. He'll give you 25 plus stolen bases in my mind, and could still very much approach close to 20 home runs once again with his launch angles. So I think I would rather Perdomo at cost, given kind of the volatility that we've seen in a lot of these kind of power only profiles. But just some interesting food for thought I thought I'd throw at you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love that, because now it makes it to where I have to justify my position, and on a podcast that's probably a good idea, and so I very much do enjoy that as well, man. So we'll move on to the next batch of names. Make sure I don't skip over here. We're going to picks 151 through pick 225. Owen, who you got?
Yeah, so my favorite pick in this range is Carter Jensen. Is currently going at 205.5. I just think this is really good value, especially given kind of the all around nature of his profile and kind of how he looked in kind of the brief pro debut when the Royals called him up. 13.0 walk rate was really good to see. Sub 18% K rate. Don't expect him to sustain the average. He hit 300, 391, 550, but I do think this is a 275, 350 hit, 480, probably close to maybe a bit more than that hitter who can give you good ratios, who can give you 20 plus bombs. Like, I really think we could be looking at a potential 2025 Drake Baldwin type season with Carter Jensen. Another thing I really love is the launch angles. They weren't quite as good as they were in AAA. In his MLB debut, but in AAA, he had a 16.6 degree launch angle, paired that with a 58.8 hard hit rate, 94 mile per hour average EV. Really, really good. And I think too, especially with them moving the fences into, I think Carter Jensen is going to smash this ADP, and especially at a position where I tend to avoid kind of the earlier options. Like, I don't anticipate having Cal Raleigh shares at costs. I don't really anticipate having a ton, even in that kind of tier one, like the Shea Langoliers, the Hunter Goodman, who's actually a fade for me at cost, and the William Contreras. Although if Contreras falls a little bit, I'd probably consider it. But when I kind of see this type of profile who can give you kind of batting average, give you OBP, give you ratios, give you power at the catcher position and where he's going in drafts, in a position I like to wait on anyway, Carter Jensen will be probably one of my more favorite late round targets in 2026 fantasy drafts. And I do think there's a legitimate chance that he's the 2026 AL Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, man. If Carter Jensen ends up being your catcher too, you're doing fantastic. And even if he ends up being your catcher one, you pair him up with someone like Francisco Alvarez, something like that. That's not a bad catcher duo. I think you can always pick up some fines later in the year as well, especially in a FOB setup. I feel like there's a lot of times a lot of catchers they seem to come up a lot. And so, especially in a 12-team setup as well. So for me, I definitely like Carter Jensen at cost here. I mean, 20% barrel rate in your debut. I mean, that's insane. That's going to pop eyes. My question to you is how far, like, if this Kauffman Stadium thing just, it bumps up his ADP, how far into the rankings, or how far up are you willing snatch him compared to where he is now.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably look at Carter Jensen around probably a little after pick 150. I think there's quite a few options ahead of me that are, fine options at catcher, but don't kind of wow me all that much. I like Gabriel Moreno, but I like waiting on Jensen a bit more at costs. Adley Rutschman at 155. I think he's an intriguing bounce back candidate, but again, at cost, I would take Carter Jensen. I think so. He's currently right now he's going as the catcher 17. I think you can argue him a lot closer to Adley Rutschman and Alejandro Kirk, the catchers 11 and 12. So I would take him pretty comfortably higher than he's going. I think even if the ADP bumps up to something in the 160 to 180 range with the fences moving in, I'm still very happy with him at that cost. I would rather kind of have a duo of, as you mentioned, Alvarez and Jensen, rather than kind of reach on an earlier catcher earlier in the draft.
Yeah, and I think there's a larger lesson here is try for me, I don't like reaching for guys based on a perceived positional scarcity, because if I'm drafting someone at pick 150, I want 150 value, right? I don't want to be forced to reach. And so with someone like Carter Jensen is someone I don't think you're being forced to reach on because the upside is there. And we've seen it, right? I know it's a small sample size, but it's not like he's an unknown. We saw him do it pretty well in this small sample size here. And so it's not like, I don't think it kind of alleviates whatever risks there might be with the unknown. Because of course, with a young guy, you never know. It could end up just flopping early in the year or taking a while to get going. But I don't think necessarily will be the case here. He's on a good team context, so good RBI opportunities. Path to playing time is there for him as well, because him and Sal P will be swapping out, a catcher DH kind of situation over here. I think you're right with the price here, because if especially for me, like Adley Rutschman, a decent bounce back candidate, but I've always kind of been kind of iffy on taking guys like Adley Rutschman there, and if he's there versus Carter Jensen, I'd much rather just reach on Jensen, that's for sure. So moving on to my Royal in this range, that's Jack Caglione going at pick 222. And here's the thing is that obviously the surface numbers were horrible, slash to 237, 295. But of course, you got to look beneath that. And man, there are a lot of interesting numbers here. The strikeout rate was nice at 22% to 7.8% on the barrel rate. Those numbers were incredible in the minors. He had a 12% barrel rate, a decent hard hit of 42%. Of course, the launch angle, the ground ball numbers were not what you want them to be, that's for sure. But in AAA, he got that ground ball number down to 40%. So he has shown the propensity to improve upon that number, and just more time in the more time in the majors, more time working on it. I think that number is going to improve. He's going to get that launch to where it needs to be. He's already pulling the ball nicely at a 43% pull rate. And then, man, I love the plate discipline numbers here. An 89% end zone contact rate with a 75% overall contact rate. And he's an aggressive swinger too, with a 51% overall swing rate. So he's swinging a lot. He's making a lot of contact in the zone. And that's a beautiful combination for me, especially for a young slugger, someone who's already shown that he can make all that contact in the zone and return the type of barrel rates that he has. That's going to help him overcome the bat speed issue. And so for me with Jack Caglione, I'm very much in on him, especially at pick 222. I think that's criminally low. I can see me taking him as soon as pick 180, pick 170 or so, just with the amount of immense upside that he has, with the fact that he's able to get those type of plate discipline numbers going for him at such a young age. And then of course add on Kauffman, man. The improved stadium definitely helps as well. Because he's not like the Kauffman switch doesn't necessarily help people that are elite lift and pull guys, right? Because the corners didn't come in. This type of improvement is going to help someone that doesn't rely on lift and pull to get their power. And Jack Caglione with that 12% barrel rate, I think is going to have that. It has that ability to capitalize on the improvements to the stadium. What are your thoughts on Mr. Cags?
Yeah, I mean, I found myself very split on Jack Caglianone. On one hand, the whiff rates against breaking and off speed, both close to 35%, really concern me. The chase rate north of 40% is horrendous. But at the same time, the X stats all point to him being at least better in 2026 than he was in 2025. I think the cost is at a point in the draft where I am willing to kind of take a flyer on that kind of upside. I'm just tempering expectations a little bit. I think even if he were to improve the chase rate to kind of an upper 30s, I do think that still limits some of the batting average a little bit. I don't think he's ever going to be a great OBP guy, but I can see a season where he's maybe a 250, 320, low to mid 20s home run guy, which at cost is fine. I like the price enough that I'd be willing to take a shot, just kind of depending on how the rest of my team is looking. But I do think that some of the red flags are still kind of persistent in his profile, and I would like to see him improve a bit on that.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. And the thing is, if he were a more selective swinger, I might be a little more with you. But the fact that he's an aggressive swinger, swings so much, and is already making so much contact in the zone, is what sells me on him for that. Because yeah, the chase rate is there. I get it, but I think that he can overcome that as long as he's making that contact in the zone. Because I'll take the chase. I'll take that aggressive approach as long as he's making that end zone contact. And for me, end zone contact is a stat that I feel like personally I've kind of overlooked over the years, and I'm trying to really keep an eye on it because that's what happened to Michael Harris in the second half of last year. He continued to make a ton of contact in the zone, and we saw the type of results that can bring. And so for me with Caglione, it's kind of the same thing. As long as we are seeing that end zone contact rate and we see him doing it, and again, this kind of prospect pedigree that he had headed into as a prospect, and he is showing the propensity to get those results. I very much am in on Caglione, especially at pick 220. Like, I mean, if I am going to be drooling whenever I'm picking him to pick 190, 200, I'll be smashing that button all day, every day.
Yeah, one thing too on Caglianone is I think when you have the struggles against breaking and off speed that he does is you need to crush fastballs. And I don't think he's shown that. He hasn't shown that yet against MLB pitching. The XBA was 261 versus 152 actual, which is fine against fastballs. But I think when you have those kind of whiff rates against breaking and off speed, lower EVs as well too, I just think you absolutely need to destroy fastballs. That being said, I think Jack Caglianone is more of a kind of dynasty buy for me than a redraft buy. Outfield is really deep. I think if he got to the 240, 250 range, I'd be happier with him. And I think there are some cases where he will get into that. But I think, too, I also like kind of the safety of kind of the outfield position in this range. I really like kind of Wilyer Abreu, 20 picks later at cost. I think he's a 25-80 plus maybe even a 30-90 guy with a better average in OBP than Cags will have in 26. But even some of those later options, if you get a little past 300, you get to the Dylan Beavers range, who could be a 2020 guy with a good average, good OBP. There's it, and also some more kind of. I think too. I would ask is that I like Cam Smith at almost pick 400. I think that's where my risk tolerance gets a little bit greater than it does and where Cags is going. So I think still kind of very split. I think there's a world in which he hits 30 home runs in 2026, and I think there's another one where we don't see the improvements on the chase rate. MLB pitchers will continue attacking him out of the zone, and we kind of see them. We kind of see him just get fed with breaking and off speed.
Right. No, I get that. And I guess it also might seem like we might just have two different philosophies here. I might be looking, like I said, very early, getting that safety, and then I'm drafting for upside later. And so I think it will also depend on my draft strategy headed in. If I look at my roster around pick 180, 190, and I've taken a lot of like Roman Anthony, and I've taken Michael Harris, I've taken other guys that carry some risk, I might avoid Cags in that scenario. But the way I envision me building my teams, I'm hoping that I'm able to get enough safe options early that will allow me to take the risk on Caglione, and especially in FOB leagues. I'm also assuming a FOB league situation here as well, where you're able to jettison him at pick 220 a little bit easier than you would at other costs. You can give him about a month and a half, and then see what happens. and so for me, what I think it is, I think you're right on the draft strategy idea, is that if I am taking a lot of more risk than I usually do early, I might have to avoid CAGs. But for me personally, if I get the safe options I want, then I feel like I'm more free to take Caglione later on in the draft. Any extra thoughts on this before we move on to our next batch of names?
No, I mean, I think really he's a very I think I could say polarizing target. Like I on one hand, like the ADP, I agree with you at that point in the draft. Like I'm not someone, I don't love to target floor early. I like to leave that to the middle rounds. I'm a big believer in that upside wins championships, but also having a balance between high upside players and then having kind of steady, consistent contributors. Because I think championship winning teams have a good mix of both, where those boring and also those kind of throw upside. So I think a lot of it too comes down to team strategy. And I think too is like, I think CAGs, I don't have a major issue with the costs. I think even if you look at some of the guys in the 180 to 190 range, there are some risks there. Addison Barger, to name one. There's some platoon risk there. His arm is really good and he could have dual eligibility, which helps him a little bit. If we're getting 2025 Trout, this isn't, this is someone where I think I could argue him a lot closer to Caglione than where he's going. Alec Burleson at 194, who I think is a solid player. I think he's a high floor guy, but the counting stats aren't going to be great in that lineup. I don't think the upside is higher than a top 150 pick. And then you kind of get to the Sal Frelick, who, what kind of power is he going to give you? He's going to be a great OBP guy, great average guy, great steals guy. But I think the range of the draft is interesting because I think a lot of personal preference goes into, are you putting Caglione closer to those guys where they kind of have their question marks, or are you kind of more of a more scared away by having bigger red flags than some of the guys going in that range?
Awesome. I love this back and forth, man. This is awesome. It definitely does different strategies here. And just side note here, Kansas City Royals are plus 1,400 to win the American League. That makes them the 7th favorite in the league. Not horrible odds there if you head over to FanDuel and want to place your bet there. Not the worst time to do that, especially with if there might be a move in the market with the stadium news dropping here. But if that's your cup of tea, maybe the Royals might be someone you might want to take a risk on in the betting market. Righty, Owen, let's move on to who your target is in the pick 226 through 300 range.
Yeah, so my target in that range is Brett Beatty at third base. I think I think prospect shine is really coming into play here, where he was a really highly touted prospect coming up. Hasn't really blown the league away since he's been up, but I think 2025 he showed the potential to at least be an above average regular at third base, and I think he's going to get every opportunity to show that in 2026. In 2025, he hit 254, 313, 435, 25% K rate, around a little higher than league average. Walk rate is 7.6, 18 home runs, 50 RBIs. But the underlying data was really noticeable to me. The average EV jumped over 3 miles per hour. But the barrel rate up to 12.8 from 5.4, so more than doubled. The hard hit rate up over 13%. The XBA and the X slug were both a little bit better than his actual. And I think overall, especially in a week, the chase rate to 24%, right around league average. The zone contact was respectable. The swing strike rate wasn't glaring. There's just a lot of things in this profile that I like, especially at a weak third base position where, you mentioned kind of a lot more kind of scarce positions and kind of grabbing them early. I would be very comfortable with Brett Beatty as my kind of starting corner infielder in a spot like that. And I think I do think he is a 25 plus home run option at third base, which, where he's going in drafts right now after 250, I'm kind of all over that price.
Yeah, he's definitely a late bloomer kind of guy. He's from personally, I had him in a dynasty league that I inherited a pretty poor team. I held on to Beatty as much as good. I ended up dropping Beatty early in 2025 last year for Lenyn Sosa. So I like Sosa, like what he ended up doing. So it wasn't a horrible move for me. But I'm not too sure how much I trust what we saw, since he did have such a long time in the majors before he did what he did. It gives me slight pause, but at this cost, at 256, I'm good. I'm wondering though, for me, I wouldn't go much higher than 256 though. I wouldn't go to like the 230, 220 range for Beatty. How far up the draft are you willing to go with Beatty?
I'm probably willing to go. Probably going to start another back and forth, which I think is great. But I'm probably willing to go even a lot closer to pick 200 than where he's going.
Okay.
Looking at some of the names in that range, I think he's proven more than Dalen Lyle has, who's at 208.4. Although I do like Dalen Lyle quite a bit at that cost. I have very minimal interest in Ezekiel Tavar right after him at 209. Dylan Dingler is a high floor catcher, but I don't think he outperforms Beatty in 2026. I think at this point in the draft where you're getting maybe kind of 2 or 3 category players, I would much be willing to take a flyer on Brett Beatty, who too, and like I think too there might be some stolen bases there. So I don't think a 25 passable OBP and good ratios is out of play for Beatty. But I think when looking at a lot of the guys ahead of him, like Heliot Ramos at 221 is another one. And then you kind of get to, I like Sal Stewart a lot, but I think when Brett Beatty is going 35 picks later than him, I like Brett Beatty a bit more at costs. Matt McClain had an atrocious 2025, still has a lot of big questions. He's at 213.9. So I think you could even get a little ambitious and argue that Brett Beatty should be a lot more in that kind of 180 to 190 range with the kind of Spencer Torkelsons, the Matt Shaws, the Isak Paredes, the Bryson Stott type of players.
Right on, man. I see that because the barrel rates are there. I'm going through some of these names right now, and so the guys I would take ahead of Beatty, and I pulled up the wrong thing, so these aren't going to be perfect position to position matches. But I think I would take Adolis Garcia before him. Let's see here. And then, of course, I'm going to make a case for my guy next, Max Muncy of the Dodgers. I would take over him as well. But I think ultimately you're right. I would debate Sosa on the Lennon Sosa there personally. Looking at these names, though, maybe I'm starting to warm up to you because a lot of these names are not super intriguing. Got guys that would fit specific team mold. I like Hassan Kim at 274. I don't like Mason Wynn. I'm not Carlos Tevez, bad. Jake Berger, bleh. All right. Yeah. No. All right. So maybe I am on you in that cost. I don't think there's anywhere ahead of him. How far would I would definitely take him over Caleb Durbin is going there? Wow. I would take let's see here. Spencer Steer has a lot of risk. I would probably take Willie Abreu. So I can see me going up to 240 is where I'm looking.
Okay.
I think Polanco, Murakami, Abreu, Manzardo is a guy I love. Manzardo. So I guess we ask that question: Manzardo or Beatty?
I would take Brett Beatty fairly comfortably.
Fair enough, then. I guess I'm not. You seem to be pretty averse to guys that I guess have play discipline issues.
That and also I think too when I think I'm looking at it more from a I would take a guy who can be kind of average to above average in 3 or 4 categories versus a guy who could maybe be really good at 1 or 2, such as Manzardo with the power and OBP.
Okay, fair enough then. Right on. That's awesome.
And I think looking at like the third base landscape too is like I think so. Brett Beatty is the third base 20 right now. Matt Shaw, who's currently in a utility role as the third base 13 at 189. I think you could even squeeze in Brett Beatty in between Addison Barger as the third base 12 and Matt Shaw as the third base 13. Isak Paredes is probably one I'd still take higher than Beatty. Royce Lewis is not my type of player, so I would comfortably take Brett Beatty over him. Jose Caballero, again, easy Brett Beatty for me. I would take Brett Beatty over Munetaka Murakami. The next third baseman is the third base 17. I would take Brett Beatty over Caleb Durbin, although I think Caleb Durbin does have some sneaky value there at price. And I would take Brett Beatty 100 times out of 10 over Mark Vientos. So I think when you look at that range, I think you can. I think it's a range too where there's a lot of big question marks, and you look at that when you look at that kind of 13 to 20 range, you have a mix of guys coming off really bad seasons with some big question marks. Guys who aren't going to be everyday players. And then in Murakami's case, how's the hit tool going to translate? How's everything else other than the power going to translate? Is he a good enough defender to get, 550 plus PAs. And I think there's just, you get to the question mark point range of the position. And I think Brett Beatty in that kind of 13 to 20 range has the least for me right now. So I think I would be aggressive with him. And I would say that in my positional rankings, which I'll have coming up, I would probably rank him higher than Matt Shaw and behind Addison Barton.
Hey, fair enough. And so I guess let me add a little caveat here. My playing the ADP game, not taking into account positional scarcity. For me, that's like pick 150 and before. When you get to this part of the draft, you have to take a look at where the fall off on the range is, and you're right on third base. It's not great. There's a lot of names I don't really love here. So from that perspective, I definitely get taking Beatty. Maybe be a little more aggressive if you missed out on some key third baseman early, because you got to find something safe to fill the position, especially if you need a corner infielder. So I definitely get that, and especially Philly on Murakami. I like being aggressive on these power guys, but that one's too aggressive for me personally, even at that cost, because they're. Murakami's floor, and I kind of want to bounce this idea off you, is the minors. The amount of potential swing and miss that he has. This dude could start the season in AAA if he goes up to spring training and has like a 60% contact rate and just can't make contact, then there's no way the White Sox can start him. So do you think that's like, am I being too like crazy on that thought, or what?
No, I completely agree with you. I think the floor is a Joey Gallo type player where, he may hit under 200. I don't think his OBP, I don't think his walk rate will even be as good as Gallo's was. And, then you kind of look at the lack of speed. And I think, Gallo was a better defender there for a point of time, which helped him in the lineup. But I think Murakami is a very volatile profile with a very wide range of outcomes, anything going from out of the league by the time his deal is up with the White Sox, or he could be a 40 home run slugger who, maybe some pro coaching at the MLB level can at least make him passable if he's going to be a low 200s hitter and still give you the kind of power. I think the power I don't have any questions about will translate. I think the rest of the profile, especially with how analytical heavy the sport is, I don't love, one tool guys, and that being Murakami's power when the defense is bad and there's nothing else in the profile that's going to be, at least in my opinion, fancy relevant.
Absolutely. The only time I'm taking Murakami this year is one of my last picks at 12-team league, because first base, you can find corner infield depth on the wire. So that's like and it'll have to be like one of my last picks. So anyways, kind of divergent there, a little tangent there. Let's move on to my pick here, and that's the Dodgers' Max Muncy, going pick 260. Like I know there's durability concerns. He's hasn't put together necessarily a full season, but it's not like he's been out like a lot. It's not like he missed entire seasons or anything. And the dude is still incredible. So it's I talk a lot about taking a lot of upside risk and whatnot. Muncy is a guy that has the upside, and it's a little safer than a lot of these options. Especially when we look at I'm going to go back to the plate discipline here. It has gotten incrementally better over. Well, he's gotten incrementally more aggressive at the plate over the years. Literally has gone. His overall swing rate has gone from 36% to 37 to 38 to 39 to 40 to 42% this year, this past season. He has incrementally got more aggressive at the plate, and that has led to an increase in the end zone contact rate. It went up to 84% this year. The overall contact rate got better. So he's swinging more and he's making more contact, and that contact is hella elite. We're talking about a 13.6% barrel rate, 51% on the hard hit rate, a 19-degree launch angle, and a 54% pull rate. That's 40 home runs right there. If he can get to 650 plate appearances, that's a guy that can really, this guy can be a first round dude this late in drafts. I know that's like a top 1% outcome kind of thing. Odds are way against it, but it's at least within the cards. And at pick 260, if that's just within the cards, within the realm of possibility, I'm there. I can see me taking Max Muncy close to pick 200, then pick 260 with the K rate dropped off as well. My God, anytime you have a guy that has elite barrel rates, exit velocities, lift, and pull, that's the whole package when it comes to power.
Yeah, I would. I agree with you, and I think I could get behind him a little closer to pick 200. I would completely rule out him being a first round value at this point in the draft, though. I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration for a guy who I think could be a 25 home run guy. I do have some questions about the durability and the playing time and that lineup, but I don't think he's going to be. I don't think we're seeing much more come for the average. I think he is at worst a 20 home run guy with a good OBP and acceptable ratios, which for fantasy there's some value in that. I just think he is a far cry away from what we would look at and guys we're taking in the first round, where it's like guys who are going to be elite or borderline elite in 4 or 5 categories. Guys that there are absolutely no questions about the playing time, durability, mostly too, with a few notable exceptions. Young with kind of much more upside. But I do like Max Muncy at cost. I think at that point in the draft, it kind of goes back to what I talked about earlier, just kind of mixing your upside picks early with some kind of floor players. He was much better when he kind of got the glasses last year. But I just don't. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I see better than a 25 home run, really good OBP and good ratios type of profile from Max Muncy. So that kind of gives me a little bit of hesitancy. But I do think in the range he's going at, I would prefer him to. I'd prefer him to Mark Vientos once again. I would probably rather Max Muncy than Munetaka Murakami in 2026. There's a few options going higher that I think at cost, I could definitely be talked into taking him closer to kind of the 215, 220 range.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, let me be clear. I'm not drafting him in the first round. I'm not doing that. And honestly, the earliest I would probably take him was around pick 200 because of durability concerns. But if he
Yeah,
can
no,
get the 650 plate appearances, man, he's in the Dodger lineup. That's a lot of runs. That's a lot of RBI. I'm actually more of a believer in the batting average than most because he's gotten that line drive rate to 20%. So it's not like he's like an extreme fly ball hitter. So I do think that gives him propensity to get to that 240, 250 batting average range. I mean, like I mentioned, the lift, the pull, the barrel, the exit velocities are all elite. Like in it, and they've been consistently there. It's not like he's been, it's not like he kind of flared up here and there. The dude has these metrics and has that ability. But combine that for me, the more aggressive approach to the plate where he's swinging more and making more contact, and that contact is what it is. That's where I'm getting it. That's where I think he can bust out and be I called Brett Beatty a late bloomer. I can see Max Muncy having a career year because of his what seems to be a new approach to the plate. He's swinging more and he didn't sacrifice his hit tool as a result. And so
yeah,
I think he can be a 4 category stud.
yeah.
Well, 3 category stud, batting average.
Yeah, I have to strongly disagree. He hasn't ever hit 600 PAs in his career. I don't see 650 happening at 35 years old. His splits against lefties are also really bad, and I think he's looking a lot closer to a platoon third baseman against right-handed pitchers at this point. Like last year, he hit 157. 16 of his 19 home runs came against righties. Against lefties, he had just 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, and 22 strikeouts against 7 walks. I just don't like. I think there's definitely still value here from a fantasy perspective, and that he can give you maybe 25 home runs and a good OBP, even playing against kind of just right-handed hitters. I don't think he's somebody that I would push even into the kind of top 200, given that he's probably going to sit against lefties. Tommy Edman is back healthy and could cut into his playing time at third base. And, I think too, it's just my tolerance for platoon bats on my team is very limited. And I don't think he's somebody that I would want to start. Maybe someone I'd be fine with on my bench, but there's some things and there's definitely some things in this profile. And I just think given that what we've seen of kind of corner infield bats at this point of his career with his profile, I think too, there's also a lot of room for some volatility as well. So I think Max Muncy can approach maybe 450 plate appearances once again. I don't see the playing time against lefties is there. I'm not really buying the incremental improvements in the contact rates. The K rate drop was nice to see. It makes him a little bit more stomachable as a platoon hitter, but I think too, just I'm definitely tempering my expectations as it pertains to his upside.
Yeah, yeah, you know what? I'm not pushing him into the top 200. I would take him right around 200, maybe 210 or so is where I would push him because I do agree with the concerns on the playing time, the durability and stuff. So let me be clear on that front as well. Is that how aggressive I'm being here? I'm not going inside the top 200 with him, but if I'm sitting there at pick 200, 210, and I need to fill my corner infield spot, or if my God, I fell asleep at the wheel and I need a third baseman in a pinch, there's Max Muncy for me, and I have no qualms taking him at that price. So let's get into some sleepers here. Guys that are going outside the pick 300 that we will be targeting. We're going to give y'all two apiece. So, Owen, give us your first dude.
Yeah, so my first one here is Miguel Vargas with the White Sox. I think I think Miguel Vargas is just a really solid player with a path to everyday playing time at third base with the White Sox. That and also the improvements that he made, especially with his underlying data. The slash line doesn't really look inspiring. 16 home runs, 60 RBIs is okay, but the launch angles are elite, one of the best in the league in that department, 22.6. The barrel rate more than doubled, the hard hit rate up to over 40%. There's just a lot. The EV jumps 3.5 miles per hour. Doesn't chase a ton. The zone contact is good. The swinging strike rate is respectable. The contact rates are respectable. I think if there's between Miguel Vargas and someone like Max Muncy, I would be buying a lot more that Miguel Vargas gets 600 PAs than Max Muncy even getting 500. So I think Miguel Vargas is someone that I would take considerably higher than where he's going. I think he's a lot closer to the Brett Beatty range of player, and even I think you can argue even higher than that than outside of pick 300. And so very excited for Miguel Vargas. The splits aren't glaring. That lineup, there's not a whole lot of contention for playing time. He was perfect 6 for 6 on stolen base attempts. The sprint speed we have seen in the past be above average to borderline elite. Dealt with some injuries last season. So I think Miguel Vargas is at worst a very solid player for fantasy. And I think at best, someone who we could see, and I'll put it out there, someone who we could see take a Geraldo Perdomo type leap from useful to fantasy, stardom and fantasy.
I feel that. So since you brought up Beatty, who you taking, Vargas or Beatty?
At cost, Vargas, and I think the gap between Vargas and Beatty is a lot more minimal for me than the ADP gap would suggest. I think looking at kind of the third baseman, there you get to a lot of the after Miguel Vargas, you get to kind of some of the still maybe some interest, but not really, especially in shallower leagues for fantasy. I would take Miguel Vargas over Alec Boehm, who is going 30 plus picks higher. I would take Miguel Vargas over Max Muncy. And so I think right there that puts him right around the kind of Brett Beatty range. I would probably take Miguel Vargas in the 240 to 260 range.
Hey, fair enough. And my thing with Vargas was, or I guess is, he was very streaky last year. If you go month to month to month on his splits last year, there were some months where he was tearing the cover off the ball, and other months that he just disappeared. And so, but I will say the play discipline numbers give me some hope that he can kind of correct that and be a little more steady Eddie next year. Prospect development isn't linear. And so, seeing him take that next step to be a little more consistent is fine in my book. I am, so where is it? He's a, what, 306 is that his ADP right now? 307, something like that. I could see me going 280, 270 with Miguel Vargas, pushing up a few rounds, because I do think he has that upside. I love the improved barrel rate. You already mentioned that the launch angles. I love the plate discipline numbers as well. So I am on him. In a vacuum, I think it's Beatty over Vargas just in a vacuum. But I think since you mentioned that cost, I'm taking Vargas at his current cost. I'll take Vargas at pick 280, 290 over Beatty at 240, 230 or whatever it was. I'm with you on the cost, but in a vacuum, I'm taking Beatty over Vargas. But man, pick 300, especially the thing is the White Sox lineup. might not be too bad next year. It might not.
Not
I
at
mean,
all.
Chase, you got Chase Mardrith, maybe the Colson Montgomery actually has figured it out. Murakami could turn into who he can be. I've already mentioned how much I like Lennon Sosa. Andrew Benintendi is just a pro's pro. So you got some interesting names as White Sox lineup where the team context might not be too bad. And so there's some running RBI opportunity for you. So
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot of pushback on this.
Absolutely. One thing I'll say with Vargas too is that the walk rate and the K rate were extremely consistent throughout the season, which I think leads me to believe there's a lot more positive regression for the average. He had just one month with a walk rate below 9 and just 2 months with a K rate below or above 18%. So I think when you're looking at that, where you don't have kind of months where this guy is like a league average K rate, and then in other months he's striking out at a 35% clip, that gives me a lot of encouragement. And I think too, he's just a very solid all-around player who could at least be, at the very worst, be useful in 3 or 4 categories. And I think at that price in the draft, I really like Miguel Vargas. And you mentioned the lineup being a lot better, so I think I think we really could see Miguel Vargas kind of return top. I would say that him returning top 175 value in fantasy for 2026, I wouldn't rule that out.
Gotcha, man. So let's move on to my dude, a bit of a homer pick, but also a guy who I've just kind of always had a soft spot for this guy. It's Jesus Sanchez. The Astros dealt for him at the trade deadline last year, and it wasn't very good. It did not work out very well. But look, I think the overall body of work for his career shows he's a guy that hits the crap out of the ball. He's a guy that he got the pull rate back up to 42%. He's had a barrel rate between 11 and 12%. 4 out of his last 5 campaigns. He's had an 84% end zone contact rate 3 out of his last 4 campaigns. And the one thing, a small little nugget positivity here when he did the Astros, he got the ground ball rate down to 45% in that second half last year, and the barrel rate did stay at around 9%. The year-to-date numbers last year on the end zone contact rate and the overall contact numbers were really good. He got the pull back up. So the overall body of work for Sanchez, someone who hits the ball pretty hard. He's playing in a good lineup. He's got I think it's a good ballpark fit for him as well. I think that there's a path to playing time because his real competition is like Zach Cole. It also depends on what the Astros offseason moves are going to be. They might have to, I don't know if they're going to deal with Paredes or Walker. But I think that Jesus Sanchez is someone who's going to force their way on. I know he is a platoon bat 100%, but he's going at outside pick 400 right now. If I'm in a 15-team league and I need to pick up a 6th outfielder around pick 320, 330, I'm taking Sanchez. He's got power. He's got speed. I think he can really turn things around given his overall body of work. What do you say? What say you about Mr. Sanchez?
Yeah, I agree with you at cost. Jesus Sanchez is not really my type of profile in that he's a platoon hitter who doesn't really do anything exceptionally well. I think he's probably close to I think he's a upper teens home run guy, maybe close to 15 steals. Ratios are okay, but the average OBP slug isn't going to be great in my opinion. Especially just kind of playing against righties, which is interesting because the past few years, the EVs have been good. The launch angles have gotten progressively better. We just kind of haven't seen the home runs follow. I think there's maybe a little positive regression in the home runs, but unlike somebody like a Wilyer Abreu, who he'll give you kind of home runs, he'll give you a passable average and a better OBP. Jesus Sanchez is just not really what I'm looking for in a platoon hitter. I think at cost, though, there's very minimal risk, and you're getting to a point where he is kind of strictly a deeper league pick at cost. And so I think at price, it makes it stomachable. I'm just not, outside of that, I don't have much interest in Jesus Sanchez.
Yeah, no doubt. And so his ADP, let me pull that exact number here. 423. So I'm in on him about 100 picks earlier, about 323. But even at 323, it's not like you're paying a major price here, especially for someone who can be a 15 to 20 homer dude, 50 to 20 steals, batting in the middle of a Houston lineup, giving him 80 or so RBI, okay batting average. For your 5th outfielder in 15-team leagues, 6th outfielder even. sign me up, man. And I think that's well within the cards for him, given how well he makes contact with the ball and throughout his career. And just it just, I mean, that second half with Houston was just this looks so fluky. A lot of those metrics that he returned in Houston was just not what not what he has always done, and he was on a hell of a pace before the trade. So maybe he was pressing, hitting for an actual lineup instead of being a low pressure situation in Miami. Who knows? But he has a body of work, in my opinion, to be someone who can be a very productive fifth outfielder for you.
Yeah, I can get behind that.
Right on, man. Let's go on to our last deep sleeper, man. Who you got?
Yes, for my final deep sleeper, I have Dominic Canzone. I think he's a legitimate 2026 breakout candidate. From June 1st onward, he hit 304, 362, 488, 11 home runs, 32 RBIs, 21.4 K rate, 7.5 walk rate. A lot of red under the hood, especially with his quality of contact and expected stats. I tweeted this out on December 22nd, but in the quality of contact regard, he's actually better than Tyler Soderstrom was pre-2025 breakout in many areas. The X-Slug Canzone was 517 to Soderstrom's 481. Average exit velo, Canzone 92.3 to 91.9. Barrel rate, Canzone was slightly behind 14.4 to 14.6. Hard hit rate was virtually identical. The bat speed was a little bit lower than Soderstrom's. The big difference is obviously the chase rate. The chase rate at 36.8 for Canzone, if he can kind of get that to low to mid 30s, I think with his quality of contact, he is very easily a close to 25 home run, 70 RBI guy who can give you near everyday reps between the outfield and the DH. Also love that, there's not really not any glaring platoon splits here. He hit 276 against lefties and 308 against righties. I think when the under the hood data is as good as it is, and there's not really any platoon risk, and I'm willing to kind of overlook a playing time concern. And I do think we can see him kind of get to 450, close to 500 PAs in 2026.
Yeah, you're not going to get a lot of pushback from me. In fact, in that Dynasty League I mentioned earlier, someone dropped him, and I scooped him up immediately this offseason. I was shocked he got dropped because I'm like, did you not see the numbers? Not see what he did? The thing with Canzone has been, he got that plate discipline back, man. Not back, but he showed he got that strikeout rate down to what was it, 22%, got the end zone contact rate up to 84%, got the overall contact rate up to 75%. And I know he's playing in Seattle, but when you have exit velocities like him at 92 miles per hour, 14% on the barrel, 50% on the hard hits, you can overcome that Seattle ballpark and you can still be productive. So it's not like he's middling around 89, 90 on the exit velocity, 9 to 10 on the barrel kind of dude. Nah, these are elite quality of contact numbers that he's showing us, and he got the hit tool figured out. And so I saw that, and I was like, man, I love this dude. And the second I saw him drop that Dynasty League, I scooped him up because I think because this is a 16-team Dynasty League. It's a pretty deep league. And so I was shocked and very happy that happened. And I cannot wait to see what he does next year. He's in the same range as Jesus Sanchez, and I don't know who I would take. Honestly, I don't think about it. I don't know. I guess because I did not look into the platoon splits, and so I'm taking you on that platoon split word. There's not going to be much of one because I did kind of assume there was. But if we can guarantee or become more safe with the idea that he's going to get the 500 or so plate appearances this year, because that is kind of the one concern with Sanchez, or the big concern is the platoon issue, right? And so for Canzone, if I can be convinced that he's going to get the 500 plus plate appearances, then I might take Canzone over Sanchez ever so slightly. But I don't know, man. To me, that's a tough one. But I definitely think they're in the same range. I think these are two guys I would easily take around 100 picks sooner than they're going right now, no doubt.
I think the gap is a little bit bigger, though. I think for fantasy, when it comes down to a guy who's going to be in my lineup most days per week versus a guy who's going to be in my lineup 3 days a week, I'm always taking the guy who's playing every day. I don't think Sanchez's stolen bases really bridge that gap. I think Canzone will be better for the average OBP in the slug So that's kind of three big cats right there. I think the counting stats will be better in Seattle's lineup. So I think for me, I would take Canzone a good 50 picks over Sanchez. At
Yeah,
least.
and I would and if you're right, like I said, I didn't look at the platoon splits. That would be a major deciding factor there for me, is for sure. Just because your playing time's going to be king, and if he's playing more, and I also personally play a lot more. I play a lot of daily change leagues personally, so that does make the platoon split a little more palatable, because I can have like 6 or 7 outfielders. I can just rotate day in, day out to get my to fulfill my lineup. So because I mean, I do definitely play weekly change leagues for sure, but I definitely play at a lot of daily change as well. So I also kind of have that in the back of my mind as well. So that's also another thing as well. So, alrighty, y'all, man, I'm going to get into the last name on the list. It's going to be Brandon Marsh for the Philadelphia Phillies. And he is going pick 491, so almost pick 500. So obviously not a whole lot of risk here taking him. But listen to what he did the last 200 plate appearances last year. He had 8 homers with a 302, 354, 527 slash with a 140 on the WRC plus. And he ended up getting his end zone contact rate up to 90%. 90% of the end zone contact rate for the end of the year. His play discipline got way better last year, with a strikeout rate drop from 32% down to 25%. His barrel rate was at 8%. It's been at 9 to 10% over the last 2 seasons. And you'll look at the batted ball, 24% on the line drive, 41% on the ground ball, 30% on the fly ball. The line drive is great for the batting average and all, but I wonder if he can kind of convert some of those line drives and the fly balls to try and get him a little bit more power. He's someone that has speed does have speed to get some decent steals. And he also became, like I mentioned a little bit with Max Muncy, he got a little more aggressive to the plate this year. The overall swing rate went from 41% up to 46%, and the overall contact rate stayed around 78%. And so he's the guy that makes decent enough contact with the ball. I think he's going to have a solid batting average, has a little bit of speed, a little bit of power. He's someone that, again, at 491, I'm going about 100 picks early. Maybe even like 350 or so. With Brandon Marsh, I was in on him last year. He was another guy that luckily I dropped him, and then I was able to scoop him back up whenever he started to get hot. So that was nice. I do buy those final 200 plate appearances, but I'm not going to be like, take him pick 250. Nah, he's not going to be on my 12-team leagues, I'll tell you that. But I've been on a 15-team league again. One of my final outfield picks, Brandon Marsh, has the upside to be top 250, top 200 guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit lower on the upside, but I do agree with you that I would probably look at him, especially in leagues where you have kind of left field, center field, right field, instead of just designated outfield spots, with center field being as shallow as it is. I think Brandon Marsh, solid player. I agree with you. I think there's a bit more power than the 11 home runs he showed. The hard hit rate, the average exit velo were both above average. My slight area of concern with Marsh is that kind of the defense has gone from Gold Glover to slightly above average. I think that when you look at his platoon splits, I do think that kind of makes the defense less desirable to put it in the lineup every day. But I think Brandon Marsh is a solid player. I think you can probably count on him to be, at worst, like a 15-10 guy with a good average, good OBP, decent slug, some good counting stats too from the Phillies lineup. Yeah, I think looking at like the 350 range outfielders, like you have, Cedric Mullins, Evan Carter, Chase DeLauder, Matt Wallner, Nick Castellanos, Harrison Bader, all in that kind of 350 to 375 range, and none of those are super overly inspiring to me, that where I would say all are comfortably above Marsh for me.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely, man. I feel you, man. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast, man. Any other targets that we didn't get to, or anybody that you really want to mention before I let you go?
I think, one that I'll pull up, just because I know we're kind of getting close on the time is Zebby Matthews, who I really like, the pitcher, but I'm gonna throw it out there since we got through the hitters. 382 for his NFBC ADP. 3.79 FIP, 18.1 K to base on ball ratio. The chase rate north of 30% was really good. Swing strike rate just under 13%. The fastball velo ticked up over a mile per hour, and he has 2 secondaries, slider and the curveball with a whiff rate greater than 34%. So I think at worst we can see kind of Zebby Matthews emerge into an SP4 type for fantasy. I don't know that we're going to see kind of a low to mid threes ERA year, but I think with his peripherals also got. I think when I see kind of this combo of kind of stuff and commands, I get really interested, especially in pitchers. And so I think he's somebody where I would have no problem with him as my SP5 and, a 14 teamer. So I think especially now when you look at that price and, a lot of pitchers going higher than him right now. I'm all over Zebby Matthews at price. So that's just one that I'll shout out.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I can't agree with you more. Anybody listened to the podcast last season, I was recommending Zebby Matthews as a streamer a lot. I think I mentioned this to you on Twitter earlier today. It sucked he didn't break out the end of last year like I thought he would, given his swing and miss potential, and they got the opportunity. But at the same time, it's probably good for the draft season because now he's hella cheap, and he's someone that I can now comfortably have on a lot of teams once draft season really gets underway. Alrighty, man. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
Nope. I think we got through a lot, and great episode. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. I'm Paul Williamson. He's Owen Hurd of Scout the Statline. You can follow him on Twitter at Owen_FBB. And then also follow Scout the Statline at Statline Scout. That's at Statline Scout. And make sure you visit the website, scoutthestatline.com. Go check out Owen and his work. He does great work over there, y'all. I'm Paul Williamson. Follow me on Twitter at PaulW_34. Same thing on Bluesky with no underscore. Make sure you follow the Sports Ethos YouTube account at Sports Ethos to subscribe to get more of my videos. I also have a lot of shorts up on YouTube as well. Same thing on TikTok, actually. I'm on the TikTok at PaulW_34. So please rate and subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the channel, do all the lovely things for me. I would really love it, and I appreciate it, and I love you forever. I'm Paul Williamson. He's Owen Hurd. This has been Fantasy MLB Today, a Sports Ethos presentation brought to you by FanDuel. Y'all have a good one.